I just want to do God's will.
The kind of revolution that the world needs is a Christian revolution.
If you want a miracle, you've got to expect it to happen.
You're the recipients of God's grace and God's blessings, and you rejoice in that reality.
Welcome to Life Today Live. I'm Randy Robinson. Great to have you here. Now, if you've ever watched this program much, you've probably heard me say that life is a journey, and I really do look at it that way. And I think that helps because you realize, hey, not everybody's on the same place in their journey as you are. You can have grace towards them. You can have grace towards yourself because I'm not the person I was, yesterday or 10 years ago or 30 years ago. Thank God. And we learn. We mature. We experience things. We deepen our faith, our understanding. We accomplish things. And I think looking at life as a journey is a positive way to look at it and to understand it, to set some goals, and to move along your path. Well, we're going to talk to somebody today who knows about journeys. And when Tom Turcich, my guest today, completed his journey, he was the 10th person out of the whole world to actually walk around the world. And his dog Savannah, as far as we know, the first dog to ever do it. He has a book out now that is called The World Walk, where he tells his story and the lessons and motivation and things that you can take away from his journey. And he joins us right now to talk about it. Tom, welcome to Life Today Live. Great to have you on the program.
Thanks for having me. Good job on the pronunciation of my last name.
That's only because I asked before we started rolling. So, first question, and I know, first question everybody has, why? Why would you walk around the world?
Yeah, I had a friend who I was very close with, and she passed when I was 17 and I was 16. And that was the first time that I had a close personal experience with death. And I was 17. It was very formative. And I realized that my time here is short and I wanted to make the most of it. And so when I really thought about what do I want out of my life, I decided that I wanted to travel. I wanted to be forced into adventure. I knew I was timid and introverted, and I wanted to grow out of that. And I wanted to understand the world. And then on top of that, I didn't have any money. So I found these guys who had walked around the world, and it seemed like the best way to solve all of those problems and to get the most out of life in the way that I want it.
Tom, I actually like to travel too. I've been around the world on airplanes. Just from a logistical standpoint. Okay, first of all, what does it mean to walk around the world? Where do you actually go?
Yeah, so to walk around the world, you have to go coast to coast on 4 continents, and then you cover the circumference of the Earth in distance. And so I did that well over. But then if you look at the records of people who have walked around the world, not everyone has done 4 continents, ocean to ocean, or not quite the circumference, but it's kind of like, you know it when you see it. If they've been out there walking for 3.5 years, that's pretty good. So yeah, it's the kind of thing that you just walk for a long time and you cover a lot of distance.
And just logistically, I mean, you don't just start in your hometown and just keep going. This is on and off again kind of thing?
No, that's pretty much how it was. I walked out my front door. I walked down to Texas, and then I walked down to Panama City over that first year, and then flew from Panama City to Bogota, Colombia, and then it was down South America along the West Coast and over to Uruguay over the second year. And then on and on and on. In Europe, I walked Denmark down to Spain, across Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, up Italy, along the Mediterranean, across Turkey, Georgia, Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and then eventually flew home, Seattle, back to the US. And pretty much it was unbroken. I had to come back briefly after South America to get my dog's paperwork to get her into Europe. So I stopped for a few months then.
Okay.
And then COVID, I got stuck in Azerbaijan for 6 months. So that slowed things down.
I've never heard that. I got stuck in Azerbaijan for 6 months. Where do you sleep? Where do you stay? How do you eat?
Camping, like 95% of the time. Especially in the beginning, it was almost all camping. I didn't have any money over those first 2 years, really. And I also had this really hot, burning internal desire to prove to myself that I could do this and prove to everyone else that I could do this thing. So I was walking 24 miles a day through the rain, over the mountains, in the jungle, through the desert, whatever it was, kind of without fail. And eventually it got to a certain point, somewhere down in Peru, maybe, where I realized, I should probably like slow down and see some of these places. And so then I kind of started taking a day or two off and getting a $7 hotel, a couple nights a week, something like that. And yeah, just like learning to slow down and see the world in that way. And then as far as food, there's a lot of dry goods that I carried with me. So I had a stove then that would allow me to cook pasta most nights, and then a lot of peanut butter. Peanut butter is like the ultimate travel food. It's got fat, got salt, got sugar in it, a ton of calories. So a lot of peanut butter jellies, granola. And then in between that, whenever I came to a restaurant or a cafe or something, I would supplement what I carried with me with, as much as I could eat. I was burning probably 5,000 calories a day when I was going. So
Crazy.
it was just kind of this constant shoveling food into my face to maintain any sort of muscle mass.
Yeah, yeah. It's just wild. Okay, this has to be. And you mentioned some countries, and I know just by mentioning them, I mean, you look at the U.S. Department of or the Department of State Department, whoever it is that issues the travel advisories. Some of these are like level 2, level 3. Some of these are not safe places. Did you ever have any issues?
Not really. I was held up at knife point in Panama City, coming through a pretty bad
That's
area.
an issue, Tom. Tom, that's an issue.
Yeah, it's an issue, but 7 years out there, you encountered probably, I don't know, maybe 20,000 people, and you have essentially one bad encounter, maybe two. I'd say it's pretty good. And the same thing would happen if you were anywhere. But no, I mean, I think when I began, I had this belief that people are good and kind and generous pretty much everywhere you go. And I would say that bore out, 99.9% of the time, people just wanted to make a little money, hang out with their family. And you see that over and over and over again. And of course, there's like, some bad actors here and there, but that's everywhere. But I, camped on people's land occasionally, and because I had to, and inevitably the farmer or the shepherd, whoever it was very nice, and they're just wondering what I was doing on their land at 5 a.m. Maybe offer me some chai or some coffee. I got put up all the time. Truckers would give me food and water when I was out in the desert, in the middle of nowhere. So yeah, Central America, I think statistically was the most dangerous region of the world that I walked through. It was also the first region abroad that I walked through. And so I was very on edge. But I think a part of that is just not having traveled and not having a good gauge of, is this a actually dangerous neighborhood, or is it just a place that I don't understand? That's different than home.
Yeah.
And if I went now, I would be much more relaxed there to have a better sense of what each place actually is. But that's just traveling. Traveling is just this education that you go through, and you see, oh, there's a million different ways to live. People dress differently. The language is different. The food's a little different. The climate's different. But really, when it comes down to it, it's just people hanging out everywhere. Nothing changes in that way.
That's wild. Okay, so I can imagine. Obviously, you learned more about culture than any student in any classroom. You learned, probably picked up a little language here and there. You probably know more about food and culinary things than the average person. What did you learn about yourself?
Yeah, that was the primary education for sure. When you're walking, it's just you and you out there. It's you and your thoughts, and you have nowhere to hide. And I'd say the first 2 years in particular were very transformative and reflective. And I think it's rare today to have the space to listen to yourself. It's very easy today to kind of cover everything up with, Instagram and Reddit and podcasts and television, and you just any way you want, you can kind of distract yourself and cover up any uncomfortable thought. But then when you're walking, you don't have that, and you have to listen to yourself. And so what you start to do the way I thought about it is kind of like pulling weeds. You know, you don't really realize it, but your mind is this garden and it's filled with weeds. But then when you're walking, you're kind of on your hands and knees just pulling weeds all day. And you start to look at your life in the terms of, okay, how did my parents affect me? How did my country affect me? What choices did I make? What mistakes did I make? What could I have done differently? And you just do this over and over and over again, that eventually you kind of run out of thoughts. I had this thought down in the deserts of Peru that I had thought all the thoughts. You know, it was empty. I was in the desert and I felt like the desert. And it's an incredible point to get to, because it brings you a lot of peace. But I think ultimately what I learned through all this is, first off, I've just been very, very blessed in my life. You know, I was born in the wealthiest country in the world, in a wealthy region, to loving parents. I had a lot of good friends around me, a lot of good family. And, you know, even to be abroad in these countries, you know, that's very fortunate. I have an American passport and I'm meeting people who are smarter than I am, more driven than I am, kinder than I am, but they're selling gasoline to passing cars in Peru. And I'm the one passing through their country with American dollars in my pocket. So, you know, I see like, man, I really won the lottery in a lot of ways. But then also you kind of get a good sense of who you are. When you're traveling, you see yourself reflected in all these different cultures, and you see, you know, not everything is this sort of objective fact of this is how it has to be. And you realize, oh, you are much more a product of what's around you than maybe you initially thought you were.
No doubt. No doubt. Yeah. And a lot of, I think just your age, that point, you know, people start to realize that. Did you learn anything about God?
About God?
Yeah.
I think God is, you know, God is a little bit everywhere. That's what it felt like, you know, and you have people, these conversations with everyone in every different culture.
Yeah. Different religions.
And yeah, a lot of different religions, you know, in North Africa, there's some very devout countries, in Algeria and Morocco, and it's really woven into the daily life. And I think it's important. It's important for people to have something to believe in, to hold on to guide your life, and to know is looking out for you. And it's universal. You know, people talk about God and believe in the goodness of a higher being pretty much everywhere.
Yeah.
And I think it's very comforting to go into some of these places and know that these are devout people who are looking for the best in people and that open their home to you.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. I mean, as a Christian, it's kind of sad, but like literally Paul says that this is what it looks like to be a Christian. And he says, you're hospitable. You open your home to the stranger, as the Old Testament, New Testament. And, you know, in American culture, I don't know. I feel like sometimes we've lost it a little bit. It's how we live. You know, I go to my house, I drive to my office. I don't walk through neighborhoods. You know, I may drive through some a little quicker than others, you know, but hospitality is a little bit of a lost thing in today's culture. And I think it's a beautiful thing when you discover it. And I mean, I've experienced it in some unusual places around the world too. And with people, okay, let me ask you this, because you kind of said it. But, okay, I was in China, and we went to the home. She was the mother of our translator, and it was a tiny place. Literally, the beds were leaned up against the walls, right, because they laid the mats down and slept right there in the living room. And then the kitchen was, I mean, it was all there, right? And she made us dinner, and she was like, she felt honored to be able to serve us dinner in her little apartment, is what it was, actually, in China, in Beijing. And I saw the hospitality of this woman who's a lot poorer than any American, just about, right? And I thought, man, I've got some things wrong, you know. And you talk about, if you don't realize if you're an American, you're rich, you know. You can go. I've camped out in Angola, you know. I mean, I know what poverty looks like, but yet the people there are rich internally in ways that so many Americans are just living in poverty internally. I don't. How do you convey this to people when you've seen these things? and yet you come back to the bubble, you know, and people are mad because their coffee's not made right, and it's a $6 coffee, and you're just like, what is going on? I don't know. How do we get those values without having to walk around the world? What can you say to people?
Yeah, I mean, no, you totally, hit the nail on the head there. It's a really difficult thing to convey unless you travel. I think traveling personally is just the best way to give yourself that perspective and realize how fortunate you are, and just to be shown a lot of kindness like you were in Beijing, where you go to these places and these people open up their homes to you, and you realize, would I have done this? It makes you think, like, would I have done this?
Exactly right.
And you do that over and over and over again, and you start to wear down that question and start to change because of it. I think Americans are very, very friendly and they're very generous, but I think there's something structurally in America with like very car centric, like you were touching on the very car centric nature of it, where it really isolates people. And you lose some sense of this organic community, which other places have, where you feel like you're part of a place a little bit more. Right. And it kind of softens the blow of, say you're seeing someone out in the street or, walking, whatever. When you're in a piazza and there's hundreds of people out there, that's just one other person and, everyone. But if there's only one person out there, like, who is this suspicious person who's walking down the street, whatever it is. But something about the car-centric style of America, I think, isolates people. And then there's also this real sort of protectiveness in America where you're kind of always on your back foot. And I really experienced it when I was going through the American West, and basically every inch of land is fenced in, and there's private property signs everywhere. And I'm like, I'm back home. I'm so excited to be back home, and I love this, and it should feel so comfortable. Yet I was maybe more stressed camping in America than most other places because you're worried about encroaching on someone else's land and didn't feel quite as open. So I don't know, it's a difficult thing to do. But again, I would say, like, traveling personally is the best way, I think, to experience just the kindness and the goodness of people, and to make you question your own values and what you would do.
Yes, it will.
And then also just to realize, like, again, like, people are people everywhere. That really doesn't change.
Yeah, I love it. All right. I got it. You know that old Gene Autry, I think it's Gene Autry song, "Don't Fence Me In"? Don't fence me. Right.
I don't know that. No.
You lived it. Okay. I want to show people your website real quick. This is tomturcich.com. And if you're listening instead of watching, Tom is Tom, and Turcich is TURCICH.com. And I'm going to scroll down because I have a daughter that probably the most hiking I've done is out in Utah, which is beautiful. We took her there because she was a photography major in college and loves to travel and do outdoor photography. And right now I am scrolling down to your website, and people are seeing it because you have some amazing photos on your website. And I really love photography. Is this something you got into or something you've always done? Because, I mean, this is next level stuff.
I think I had taken maybe like 10 photos in my life before I started this walk around the world. I had this fundraiser before I began as a sort of kickoff. And before that, I wasn't planning on really sharing my journey at all. But then I had this fundraiser, and I felt indebted to these people to give them something back. And so I got a camera and I started posting to Instagram. And then very gradually, the photography just grew out of that, where I was trying to take a photo every day. And then when I got into Mexico and El Salvador and Guatemala, and I'm seeing these places that for me are really beautiful, but then I would try and take a photo of it and I couldn't quite capture it.
Yeah,
I think that's when I really started to get into photography. I go, why can't I accurately grab this beauty that I'm seeing? Yeah. And then it was just 7 years of taking photos pretty much every day. And, you get better at it just by the practice and by messing up. And every day you take a photo and I look and go, oh, I wish I would have done that different. And then you take a photo the next day and you go, well, that's good, but now I wish I did that different. So you just get better and better as it goes. And I really enjoyed it. And it was one of the few hobbies also that I could have while living out of a baby carriage and walking 24 hours a day. It's not like I had a desk to work at. I could pull out my camera, take a photo, edit it in a couple seconds, and be done with it. So it was one of the few things that fit with that lifestyle as well.
Well, it's a great way to help people get a little bit of a visualization of what you've done. All right. So now you got the book out, The World Walk, the book available wherever you get books, and you're doing a lot of I don't know, what do you call it, motivational speaking or instructional kind of speaking? Is that how you term it? Okay.
Yeah.
There's one of your points that I like the words in particular because I'm kind of a word nerd, but the concept, you say you can turn constraints into innovation, and just the word choice there I think is significant because sometimes we look at it as impossibilities, as, you know, limitations. People are watching you going, I could never do that, right? And we have constraints, but you don't say turn it into, you know, a possibility or make your dreams innovation. And innovation requires ingenuity. You know, it requires maybe figuring out a way that's a little bit outside of the norm. What are you communicating just in that thought when you speak to people?
Yeah, there's a few different things. I think on the individual level, it's the idea that your time is limited, your energy is limited. And if you want to do something, then you have to accept, you know, doing that with the sacrifices that come along with it.
Yeah.
You know, with the walking around the world, one of the big sacrifices out of that was that I was leaving my friends and family for 7 years. And that's just a sort of constraint that you have to live with if you want to live this one life. Yeah. But then more specifically, say, going back to the photography, I think this is a good example of a creative and constructive constraint where when I started to get into the photography, I started looking at Instagram as like, that's what I knew of the photography world. And then what I found was successful on Instagram were these mountain photos with a little silhouette, you know, in the Swiss Alps or in the Pyrenees or wherever, somewhere like that, in Tibet, something. And it's like this really specific style of photograph that was very successful. And at the time I was in South America and in Peru and Chile and passing through these really modest villages. And it was driving me crazy. I'm like, why can't I take these types of photographs? I wish I could. But then over time, once I accepted that, okay, I can't. All I can do is take a good photograph every day. And it turned out that constraint of not being in a beautiful place every day was what helped me grow, because it helped me get better at taking landscape photographs, at taking portraits, at taking architecture. I had to learn to photograph everything because I couldn't photograph the easy thing.
Yeah.
And so there's in the motivational speaking there, I give a bunch of different examples. The super blacks in Barcelona are one of them. The Jain religion in India is a really fascinating one. They live by this nonviolence, this very intense nonviolence tenet, and they're very wealthy because of it. They work all these very intellectual professions. But yeah, the idea of constraints, I think, ultimately comes down to forcing yourself to grow by putting yourself into, you know, an uncomfortable situation, basically, and being okay with it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very interesting. All right. This is fascinating. I love it. I love what you're doing. What do you do after you complete this? What does the rest of Tom Turcich's life look like?
I'm figuring that out. I'm figuring that out. Yesterday I was looking at land. I would love to just like have a huge plot of land and just plant trees the rest of my life. That's like probably my ideal. That's a long way off. But no, you know, this is the first time since 17 that I haven't had this really direct pinpoint focus for my life. You know, I had the world walk from 17. That was my focus until I began the day before I turned 26. And then it was 7 years of doing it. And then the book took 2 years to write. And now suddenly kind of the world is open to me in a way that it hasn't been in a long while. So I'm in this phase right now of sort of figuring out what I value and what I want to aim towards next.
Yeah. Oh, and you know, that's what I'm curious about is obviously, you know, the values anybody has, especially at the age in which you accomplish this, your values shift. You know, a lot move more towards family. We tend to complete, or we're in, you know, going for a longer education. How would have your values shift? I mean, not that they've even landed. Again, life's a journey, but what do you see just in what's important to you?
Yeah, I know they have shifted in a way, because I wouldn't walk around the world again. I mean, it was a wonderful life. It was fantastic. It changed me completely. It gave me a lot. But like you said, as you get older, you know, you prioritize family more. And I was away for such a long time that I really prioritize any time with family and friends. I just got engaged to the woman that I met on the last leg of my journey. And
Which was where? Where was that last leg? I'm curious.
that was in Washington State, in this little town
Okay.
of Omak. I was in Winthrop. She was in Omak, a very little town where we met. So, yeah. And then she kind of followed me around. She met me in Idaho and Montana and Wyoming. It was great. But yeah, the values have shifted in a certain way, where I think I always valued my time pretty greatly over making money. And so I think that has continued. And I think the World Walk fortified that belief. But now I'd say the one that I put more weight on is just time with friends and family more than on my own.
When is the wedding?
Probably 2 years, something like that. Yeah, she's in residency, so she's working like 7 hours a week right
All
now.
right. So when you do get married, how long is that walk down the aisle going to be? Like miles and miles, or just short
I
walk
mean,
like
at
that?
least 7. It'll feel like 7 years, right?
I love it. All right, Tom. Is there anything else you're doing or promoting that you want people to know about other than the book? I appreciate your time today.
No, it's a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for the thoughtful questions. And yeah, you can get the World Walk memoir wherever books are sold.
And what an interesting one. You won't be bored. And there are a lot more lessons than we were able to cover today. But wherever you're at on your journey, keep moving forward, keep learning, keep your eyes open, stay hospitable and open, and I think it'll change your perspective in a positive way. Appreciate you guys being here. Hit share, pick up the World Walk, and we'll see you again next time on Life Today Live.